Good morning. Welcome to Animal Talk Thursdays, and we're live, hopefully. We've tried this like 4 times now. We've done 4 takes, and but it looks like we're live now, so that's good. All right, welcome to Animal Talk Thursdays. I'm Dawn Hayman, the co-founder of Spring Farm Cares, and I've been a professional animal communicator since 1987. So we are here answering questions, talking about everything animal communication related. And we have some questions from last week already. We've been working on, by the way, our technical difficulties. Hopefully the sound is better. If anybody wants to give us a thumbs up on that or whatever. But we've got new microphones and hopefully everything's good. It would have been even better with our professional camera that we even have, but it wouldn't if we couldn't get it to hook up. So let's get right to your questions. We have some questions that were submitted after last week. And Becca here has, I know you couldn't see Becca, you still can't see Becca, but she's the voice behind the camera.
I'm here.
And we're going to go ahead and start with your questions.
Okay, amazing. So one of the really great questions we got last week was about the difference between wild animals and domesticated animals. Do they communicate the same way? Can we communicate with them in the same way?
Absolutely. So there is no difference whatsoever in how you communicate with domestic or wild animals and how you hear them. Same process, still a telepathic connection. The differences among animals have to do with the species of animals communicate differently. In that they have different cultures, for example. It's just like working with people in different humans in different cultures. So that's worthy of a longer answer for at another time. But animals you can talk to them no matter what, if they're wild or domesticated.
Do all animals, whether they're wild or domesticated, do they communicate the same way, or is it different depending on their individual personalities, just like people communicate?
Yes. So that's a really good question. And every animal communicates differently. So uniquely, I should say, just like people. So you have some animals that are more shy than others. You have some that are more reserved. You have some that are really outgoing. You have some that can be really funny. Those are the fun ones to work with when they're really humorous. And that's including wildlife. It's not just, our domestic animals. They each have their own personality and unique viewpoints on life and unique experiences to life and what they bring in. So and some of them actually aren't communicative at all, in that they don't care to communicate to us. And that can be domestic animals as well as wild. It doesn't matter. Some of them really don't want to communicate with us. So it just depends on, it can depend on their mood. It can depend on what they've been through in life and their experiences with humans, which for some of these animals are not always positive. So there's a lot of variables there.
How can you tell if an animal doesn't want to communicate with you?
So I go into this in detail in my workshops because, and this requires a longer answer. I'm going to give you the short version, but people make a mistake with animals and think that because they're not watching or because they're turning around and not paying attention, that they're not listening. And their body language is different. Their social, the social structure is different. So for example, I'll have students in a class go down to our barn and try to communicate to one of our horses, for example. And all of a sudden they will say to me, they'll come back up and they'll say to me, well, I tried to talk to Colonel, but he just turned his back to me and went to the back of his stall. So I will ask Colonel, did this person come try to talk to you? And he'll say, yeah, I don't know what happened. I was just in the middle of answering her and she just walked away. And it's because turning their backs is not the same as for us. Animals don't need to make eye contact with us to communicate. Now, if that were a human who you were trying to have a conversation with and the person got up and turned their back on you and walked away, of course you would feel snubbed and that they weren't listening. But that's not true in the animal world. They don't have that same social structure, and the body language isn't the same. So that's one pitfall that people come into. But sometimes animals just don't want to communicate. I've had them, people will hire me to talk to their animals, and when I try to get a connection, sometimes the animal will say to me, I really don't have anything to say, or they don't know what to say sometimes.
What happens if you have a pet of yours who does not want to communicate? Is there something you can do to get them to open up to you more?
A lot of times if it's a newer animal in your household, you just need to give them time to adjust. I have that happen here with animals that come into our sanctuary. A lot of the animals from our farm animals, for example, come in from animal cruelty cases. And a lot of them feel, really betrayed that nobody was hearing them and listening to them. But for the most part, they do want to communicate. I mean, I don't want to make more of this than it is, because more apt than not, they are willing to communicate.
Mm-hmm. A really interesting question that we just got on Facebook is about in the wild, obviously there's animals that are prey and animals that are predator, right, and sometimes an animal's killed by another one. This person asks, is there some sort of contract, maybe someone might call it like a soul contract, that they made with each other for that to happen, or is it just random? So
the whole predator-prey thing, again, I'm going to be answering this in a very short period of time, and it doesn't do it justice, because when I answer this in workshops, it's a common question. It's a longer answer, but let's just take a cat and a mouse, for example. So when a cat catches a mouse, so the predator animal and the prey animal, they do have a structure, an understood structure relationship between them. So prey animals understand that they're being, that they're preyed upon. But when the predator takes a prey animal, it is usually with respect, and it is usually very quick. And there's also the prey animal has a disconnect feature, if you will, where they go out of body into like a limbo thing, so they're not experiencing that predator animal. They're not necessarily experiencing that. So I will tell a story, because I think this is an important question. There was one time that here at the farm, it was a really tough winter. We had a lot of wild rabbits running around, and unbeknownst to me, my partner Margaret was feeding some rabbits underneath our deck. She was putting food out at night, and I didn't know that. And I'd come out in the morning and I'd see all these rabbit tracks running around, and I'd be like, what the heck are all these rabbits coming here for? And it started out just as a couple, and pretty soon there was like a rabbit freeway of tracks in every morning. So she finally was telling me that, she had put some food out. And so one night our cats were all in our bay window looking. It was after dark, and they were all looking outside, and it was a full moon. And there was all this snow on the ground. It was very bright. So we turned the lights off inside and went over to the window to see what they were watching. There was this whole line of rabbits. I mean, there must have been like 20 of them. They were just like waiting in line, and they would take each one would get a chance to go in and eat. And first of all, that was amazing to watch, because it was like, this is how animals handle this. And with people, we would have had pushing and shoving. They just waited their turn as each one ate, and then they would hop off and let the next one come in. And so they kept doing this into the feeding station. And we were marveling over this, and we were watching this and saying, wow, this is amazing. And there was this rabbit that was right outside our window who kind of saw us in the window, and he stood up on his hind legs and was watching us. And all of a sudden I had this realization, and I said, Margaret, we didn't just set up a bunny feeding station. We set up an owl feeding station for here we are out in a full moon, out in the open, all these rabbits just sitting here in line. And we have a lot of owls around here. And I thought, this is going to be horrible. So I start warning the rabbit, you got to move, you got to move, you got to run. And he looked right at me in the eye, and he looked up in the window, and he said, lady, what are you so upset about? You got to calm down. And I said, you got to run, you got to hide. You can't just sit out in the open. And I said, you're going to get eaten. And he said, we all get eaten, lady. And I said, no, that's not true. We don't get eaten. Humans don't get eaten. And he said, everybody gets eaten. And what I realized, it was like this stunning realization that to a rabbit, that is, that's a common end for them. And so that was to them, death is being eaten. And that was their frame of mind. But he then said to me, my God, no wonder humans are messed up. Do you all just walk around being afraid of when you're going to get eaten? And so, but it was an interesting way. And he said, we don't walk around afraid of that. I don't walk around thinking every day, oh my God, something's going to eat me. He said, we don't live that way. We just live each day. And I've never forgotten that communication. I've also had that replicated by other animals too. But that had a huge impact on me, because it was stunning to see from their perspective. And we got to remember, we have a human perspective, and sometimes our perspective watching an animal and assuming what their perspective is not correct. You really need to go to the animal to find out from their perspective what is happening, because they have a different understanding of life than we do.
Yeah, and you told a great story about this last week, which you can go back, if you missed the video from last week, you can go back and watch it on our page, but about a cat who was peeing on things.
Yeah.
And from the human perspective, it made no sense, but from the cat's perspective, it actually made perfect sense from the point of view that he had. When it comes to our own pets and their behavioral problems, how can we use animal communication to work on stuff like that?
So a lot of the times we need to understand from their perspective why they're doing something, just like the cat pee problem. But sometimes they have a perspective that just doesn't make sense. Let me give you an example. I've been called a lot with horses. I've done a ton of work with horses, and a frequent, this is a true story. And I've had this more than once, but it's typical for me to get a call. My horse threw me on a trail ride. But this one was very specific. My horse threw me, and I know he's trying to kill me because he spun around 3 times, reared up, and aimed exactly for a rock so that he knew that when I fell off, I was going to hit my head on the rock. Now, that's a little extreme. But I like that it's an extreme because it tells a good story of an example. And trust me that the horse didn't connive that strategically placing her so she'd hit her head on the rock. But so and I hear this all the time from show people too. I know the horses all get together at night and come up with ways to embarrass us in the show ring, and they really don't. For the most part, they don't do that. That's a human overlay of what we think they're doing. But when I communicate with them, a lot of behavioral problems, for example, with horses, are actually situations where they have pain. And they have pain somewhere in their body, and they can't, they just sometimes can't get you to understand that. And so they'll do things to try to show you that they have something going on. So, there are so many variables, but getting things from their perspective of what's going on will shine a light on why they're doing something. And sometimes it has to do with an interaction among multiple animals in your household that has nothing to do with people, and they're responding to that. So it's getting it from their perspective and really stepping back out of your own theory of what's going on and looking at it from their eyes and also their viewpoint of how they see the world, because it's 2 different things.
Yeah, and it's interesting to think about, your dog pees on the rug, and some people, they immediately go to yelling at the dog or scolding the dog. Right. What happens when an animal's doing something for what they feel is a good logical reason, and then we jump to scolding them? How do they experience that?
They experience that largely as frustration. Now, animals are not at all surprised that humans can communicate with them. What they're surprised about is why we didn't realize we could to start with. That stumps a lot of them. But it's not like I don't have to do 2 different workshops, one for the humans and one for the animals. You don't have to bring your animals in for a workshop and have me teach them that they can hear you, or that you hear them, whatever. They get that. It's nature. It's natural. All of nature. Humans are the ones most separated out from that very natural process. But the animals are right in that process. They get it. So they're not surprised when we hear them. But what they're surprised about is, why didn't you think you couldn't? Because they know we hear them. So it's frustrating to them if they have a situation that you're not getting, and they're trying to get their message through to you. They can become very frustrated, but they keep trying, and mostly they will keep trying.
Irma asked a good question about the story from last week. And Irma, yeah, you can go back and listen to that whole story. But she was asking, why didn't the cat understand that peeing on the bed was causing the owner more stress? And I think she was trying to avoid causing him stress by making him not go to work.
Right. Yeah. So from his perspective, from the cat's perspective, he was trying to keep him from going to work because that's what was really stressing him out. And, so that cat was just, that's the viewpoint of the cat. That's what he was seeing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah. But just like with humans, I just have to say this, just like with humans, when humans are having problems with each other too, we don't necessarily always see the other person's point of view. I mean, until you communicate about it. So it's the same. There's no different. Telepathy is again, I want to repeat this, is an active communication. It takes a sender and a receiver. It's not clairvoyance of knowing everything about that animal. It's direct communication with them. So sometimes they don't understand your viewpoint or vantage point either until you have like a mediator and you're going back and forth. And then it'll make sense. And sometimes you can strike a deal with them of a compromise. And I've done a lot of that over the years.
And so this mediation, we kind of touched on this last week, I think, but this mediation is easiest when there's actually someone who knows how to communicate, whether then I've done this with my dog before. I sit her down and I'm like, I'm leaving for 2 hours
right.
and I'm going to the mall. When we speak to them, can they understand what we're saying, or is it more helpful to communicate telepathically?
So when you speak to them out loud, you're automatically sending telepathically to them. It's automatic. So they are getting it, but they do understand what you tell them when you talk out loud to them, and they appreciate that. They appreciate when you do address them and tell them what's going on.
I know this is a big question, but I think a lot of people are probably thinking at this point, how can I begin to communicate with my animals? What's like the first step someone can take if they want to start to dabble in that?
So we can post this in the comment section. There are some books that I can recommend. There's a animal communicator who is like the grandmother of animal communication, Penelope Smith, who has wonderful books out there guiding you through the process. Taking a workshop, all of these help. But one of the things that I think helps a lot is start watching. I said this last week, but start watching what you're saying out loud to your animals, because frequently you're answering them, and just raising your awareness to what you're doing around them, what you're saying to them, will help you enormously, because you will understand, you will start to see instances where, oh, I did just know that. Like your dog runs in to the house and is like frantic, and you go, oh, did your ball go under the deck again and you can't get it? I mean, how did you know that? So, it's like the Lassie movies. The dog Lassie barks and suddenly, oh, did Timmy fall down the well? But I always say that's the first animal communication movie that came out was Lassie. But anyway, it's starting to watch what we say out loud to them. You'll start to learn about yourself a little bit more, and realize that these things aren't coincidental. They're just not.
So much we can talk about.
Yes.
We could spend hours chatting about it. If you have questions, we're going to do this on Thursdays at 10. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments of this video.
Yeah.
And we'll be back next
Great.
week.
And I hope you all enjoyed this. And again, we're just touching on a little bit of all of this, because I teach 2-day workshops on this, and it's involves much deeper answers than what I'm able to do just in this little bit. But also, before you go, I just want to remind everybody about our open house on September 14th. And we hope that you will mark your calendars and come and see us and meet these animals here. They love to communicate, so they love to have people come and visit them. So we hope you'll see us and give us a visit. So thanks, everybody, for your time. And thanks again for putting up with the technical difficulties at the beginning. Hopefully we'll get this nailed down by next week.
Awesome. Have a